Anni-Frid Lyngstad, better known by her popular nickname Frida, is a Swedish singer and part of one of the most highly acclaimed bands in pop, ABBA. The band shot to fame in 1974 when they performed Waterloo, the song that won them Eurovision and had them rise to a cult status, ruling the pop world from the 70s and to the 80s, until they eventually broke up. Anni-Frid was one of the lead vocalists, but despite her success, she was harboring a dark secret. At 78, the facade is finally broken and the life she lived behind the scenes of the glam has come to light. The hidden truth is that Anni-Frid was a child of war, being born to a Norwegian teenage mother and a German soldier father in 1945, when World War II was coming to an end. Her father, Alfred Hasse, was a part of the troops occupying Norway, and since the moment she was born, Anni-Frid was torn between two nations that despised each other. Anni-Frid was among what were later termed the children of shame that were born through lebensborn, a special Nazi Aryan breeding program that was established to create a superior caste of children. Norwegians were considered perfect for these twisted eugenics, since they had blue eyes and blonde hair and were seen as especially pure and racially superior. The aim of this program was to bring about a dominant race of Aryans that would take over Norway when the war was over and have a few of the young mothers migrate to Germany so they could reproduce more of these children and increase the Nordic blood in the German Reich. During the Nazi reign, there were many advantages if a mother could prove that her child had Aryan origins, which was one of the leading causes that young women who were at every other disadvantage copulated with the German soldiers. They were promised better health care in maternity homes and also received financial compensation for bearing the children. The children themselves could also be left in special homes where they would be provided with high-quality food, bias treatment, and received education that taught them the Nazi way of thinking. However, the fate these mothers and their children were to have was cruel, since they were shamed for their actions and could not bear the fact that had given in to the oppressors of their community. The children were often outcasts after war, suffering abuse and being thrown into lunatic asylums. The treatments included lack of proper food, being tied to beds for hours, and other forms of mistreatment which were all normalized since they had polluted blood. Hence, to escape this fate, in 1947, her mother took the infant Anni-Frid and ran away from their village, along with Anni-Frid's grandmother, deathly afraid of what would happen to her family and her child when other Norwegians found Anni-Frid had been fathered by one of occupying soldiers of the Nazi Germany army. However, their struggles were far from over. Anni-Frid's grandmother, Arntine, feared what would happen to her granddaughter if she remained in Norway and moved with her to Sweden, while the child's own mother stayed behind and worked in the south of the country. Being on her own in Sweden, her grandmother took on any job, no matter how tough or humiliating, to be able to take care of her grandchild. When Anni-Frid's mother was finally able to move near her mother and child, tragedy struck once again. At only 21, her mother died of kidney failure, leaving Anni-Frid with only her aging grandmother to look after her. Despite the daunting task of caring for a young child, just after going through the severe grief of losing her own daughter, Arntine did her best to persevere. Hence, Anni-Frid was raised by her brave grandmother, who stopped at nothing to ensure she was taken care of to the best of her ability. Growing up, she also believed her father to be dead, since it had been said that his ship had sunk on the way to Germany. And so young Anni-Frid grew up knowing neither her mother nor her father, shunned by her own roots that were divided in two extremes. In 1949, her grandmother decided to take her and relocate to Torshälla, where Anni-Frid grew older and started school at. During this time, her grandmother took on a job as a seamstress, suffering through painful pricks and hurt hands just so Anni-Frid would not be left wanting. During the summer holidays, she took her granddaughter to visit her aunts and uncles at her birthplace. Out of them, Anni-Frid was the closest to her Aunt Olive, who saw how lost and forlorn she was, and so took extra care of paying attention to and making her niece feel loved and welcome during her visits. Despite her aunt's efforts and her grandmother's persistence, Anni-Frid felt the impact of a broken home, where her father and mother were lost to her and her own community despised. This was one of the reasons Anni-Frid's own love life was increasingly complicated, since she did not feel at home or like she belonged in any of her relationships, developing an attachment style that was at times avoidant and at times anxious. But there was a silver lining, her music, through which she explored all the complicated feelings she otherwise could not say. During several interviews, Anni-Frid has stated that her grandmother sang her Norwegian songs when she was a child. That was one of the first reasons she fell in love with music. She was also naturally talented, and showed this from a very young age in her school years, often being asked to sing by her teachers and being known throughout her school and neighborhood for her beautifully unique voice. She always dreamed of being a singer, and her grandmother also supported her aspirations, even though she was too busy working for her to ever come to attend any of the performances. At only 13, Anni-Frid gained her first job as a singer in Evald Ike's orchestra, who stated that it was hard to believe that a young person to sing that well. In 1964, when she was only 18, Anni-Frid had married salesman and fellow musician Ragnar Fredriksson, and they had 2 children. However, since Anni-Frid herself had never seen what a positive marriage could look like, she developed conflicts and they separated. This divorce was already painful, but it was made more complicated with the fact that her grandmother, who had been her guardian and pillar throughout her life, passed away on the same day, leaving her heartbroken. It was the pain, perhaps, that made her jump onto her next relationship with Benny Andersson, who she had met a year prior. He was her partner and another member of the ABBA, them forming one half of the whole of the band. In 1977, when ABBA was rising to fame, another interesting thing happened. German teen magazine, Bravo, published the full biographical details of Anni-Frid, including the names of her mother and father, which were found by her half-brother Peter Hayes, who went to his father to confirm this. A few months later, Andersson's instigation helped in bringing Anni-Frid to finally meet her father for the first time. However, despite this sweet gesture, the pair's relationship only lasted as long as ABBA, with their marriage marking the highest period of the band's success and their divorce marking its end. Their relationship had incredible highs and lows, which often had them singing for each other and being couple goals to their fans for a long time. After ABBA disbanded, Anni-Frid left Sweden to leave behind the obvious pain associated by something that had been such a vital part of her daily life for more than a decade. She went to Switzerland and lived with her boyfriend, landscape architect Heinrich Russo Prinz Rius von Plauen, member of the ancient House of Rius, in his family castle in Fribourg. During this time, she also pursued a solo career as a singer and released many singles. The couple was married in 1992, making Anni-Frid royalty, and through her marriage with Rius von Plauen, who was also classmates with the Crown Prince Carl Gustaf, later King of Sweden, Anni-Frid got to know the rest of Swedish royal family, becoming close friends with Queen Sylvia. However, pain, it seems, was never too far, since her husband sadly passed away from lymphoma in 1999, right after her daughter had died from a car accident in the United States, leaving Anni-Frid as the Dowager Princess of Rius. In 2007, Anni-Frid finally found companionship in British peer Henry Smith, 5th Viscount Hambledon, with whom she still resides in Genolier. She also took a hiatus from music for a while, rejoining her old band ABBA in 2017 when they came back together to announce their 2 new singles and surprise fans with a virtual tour and first studio album in 40 years. Anni-Frid now spends her days in calm, finally healing from the roller coaster of her life and discussing once carefully guarded secrets more openly, able to live her truth at last.